Matthew 5:38 through 42. This is our Messiah speaking. He says, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, don't resist an evildoer. On the contrary, if anyone slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. As for the one who wants to sue you and take away your shirt, let him have your coat as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to the one who asks you, and don't turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you." May Yahweh bless His word to our hearts today. Last week, I began by explaining a harmony that exists in this text, a harmony that not a lot of people see, between the phrase eye for an eye and the phrase don't resist an evildoer. An eye for an eye is a concept that's found in the law of Moses, and it is a ruling by a court of law whereby a criminal has to be punished, and that criminal is punished equivalent with the crime that they have committed. Yahweh gave that commandment of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth to the judges of Israel for them to judge righteously, so that they would not punish to a greater or lesser degree a criminal for his or her crime. Don't resist an evildoer is a concept that is also found in the law of Moses, Leviticus 19, verse 18. But that is reserved for personal, everyday, light matters, matters that we face on a regular basis. Someone may get mad at us and they might slap us or insult us or curse us, or they might borrow money from us and not pay it back. And in these matters, we are to take the high road and not seek revenge on that person who has wronged us. We should instead respond not with more evil, but rather seek to overcome evil with good. I think that's the harmony between the two. The scribes and the Pharisees were using eye for an eye, which was a civil equity and punishment. They were trying to use that for everyday light matters that we face in our lives as we live. Now, I believe that the purpose here of resist not evil is to be a witness for the kingdom. We live in this world, but we are not supposed to be of this world. We belong to another world, a heavenly world. So we live differently. And when people see that we respond to evil with good, it makes them realize that, hey, they're really a set apart people. They're different. They're peculiar. There's something different about them. We are not just different because we wear tassels or have a beard or watch the moon. Those are good things, but we're not just different because we do those things. We're different because we pursue peace in our interactions. Even if it means being done wrong, we still pursue peace. Yeshua said, "Blessed are the peacemakers." We often read that wrong. We read it peacemaker, but we think peacekeeper. But it's not hard to keep peace between two parties that are already peaceable. What Yeshua was talking about in the beginning of Matthew 5 is those who make peace. When a situation arises that is difficult and harsh, and when we are done wrong, we step up and we make peace where there is no peace. And we do that by not fighting back. Resist not an evildoer. And I know that this is hard, and it seems like every time that I teach on a subject, then I get tested the following week. And that's how it has happened. But this is the way of the Master. This is the way of the Master. So today I'd like to go over these ways one at a time in which Yeshua says we are to be different. Let's begin by reading Matthew 5:39. This time I'm going to read from the Good News Bible. It says again here in verse 39, "But now I tell you, do not take revenge on someone who wrongs you. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, let him slap your left cheek too." Our immediate reaction to that is, No way, Brother Matthew. You're misinterpreting that. I'm not going to do that. And that reaction that we have shows us how radical teaching that Yeshua has. We immediately, when we read this, we immediately want to qualify it and say, but it's not talking about this or it's not talking about that. And we want to think of ways that we don't have to obey it before we study how we should obey it. And I'm first suggesting, as I mentioned last week, that this means what it says. A person slaps you and you don't slap them back. An example of this is when Yeshua, our Messiah, was slapped. Now, I realized that Yeshua had a mission, and part of that mission was to be wounded for our transgressions. Amen, right? So he went much further than just not resisting a slap. He did not resist when people hollered out, his own people hollered out, crucify him, crucify him. And he did not resist when Roman soldiers nailed his hands and feet to a wooden stake. There have been followers of Yeshua in history that have done the same. They're willing to die because they're a martyr for the faith. And that is a noble way to die. That is a noble way not to resist evil, to die for your faith. But I think this text in Matthew 5 is focusing on matters less than martyrdom, everyday life matters. Now, regardless of that, in John 18, Yeshua gets slapped and he does not respond to the slap with violence. Look at this, John 18, verses 19 through 23. The high priest questioned Yeshua about his disciples and about his teaching. Yeshua answered, I have always spoken publicly to everyone. All my teaching was done in the synagogues and in the temple, where all the people come together. I have never said anything in secret. Why, then, do you question me? Question the people who heard me. Ask them what I told them. They know what I said. When Yeshua said this, one of the guards there slapped him and said, how dare you talk like that to the high priest? And Yeshua answered him, if I have said anything wrong, tell everyone here what it was. But if I'm right in what I have said, why do you hit me? So here Yeshua is slapped unjustly. He had done nothing unlawful. He had taught nothing unlawful. His ministry was one that was open for people to see. But he did practice what he preached. He did not fight back, which is what turn the other cheek means. He responded to the slap with words, but he did not respond with retaliation. Now, it is possible that what Yeshua is speaking of here about the slap is suffering under a foreign government, an unrighteous government. Now, I say that because there's a text in the book of Lamentations that uses this phrase about turning the other cheek, and it uses it in that way, suffering under an unrighteous government. And Yeshua may have been pulling from that text in Lamentations when he was giving his Sermon on the Mount here in Matthew 5:39. Lamentations 3:25 through 32. Be good if you read the whole third chapter. We're going to read these pertinent verses. Beginning at verse 25. Yahweh is good to those who wait for him, to the soul who seeks him. It is good that a man should hope and quietly wait for the salvation of Yahweh. It is good for a man that he bear the yoke in his youth. Let him sit alone and keep silence because he has laid it on him. Let him put his mouth in the dust, if it is so that there may be hope. Let him give his cheek to him who strikes him. Let him be filled full of reproach. For the Lord will not cast off forever. For though he causes grief, yet he will have compassion according to the multitude of his loving kindness. Lamentations was a book that was written by the prophet Yirmiyahu. We call him Jeremiah. And Jeremiah speaks of the suffering of the people of Israel and the land of Israel, and their suffering as a nation, as a whole, because of the sins of the nation. And Yahweh has placed them under foreign captivity, Babylonian captivity. And Jeremiah is lamenting here. He is wailing, he is weeping, but he recognizes that the suffering that they're undergoing is ultimately because Yahweh ordained the suffering as a punishment to get his people back on the right track. That's what Lamentations is about in a nutshell. And so the prophet Jeremiah, he was not an unrighteous man personally, but he suffered right along with the nation. And how did Jeremiah suffer under Babylonian captivity? He took it. As verse 30 says, he gave his cheek to the one who struck him, and he was filled full of reproach because he knew that those whom Yahweh punishes swiftly, Yahweh loves. The book of First Maccabees talks about that, I read recently. It says we don't want Yahweh to wait to punish us, because then we know he's not dealing with us as children. But if he punishes us right away for our transgressions, he's trying to get our attention because he loves us. Well, in Matthew 5:39, Yeshua may have been pulling from Lamentations chapter 3. The people of Israel in the first century, they lived under Roman authorities, Roman government, and in the midst of that governing, they would have times of oppression. And what were they to do during these times of oppression? They were to turn the other cheek. They were to submit to the oppression, knowing that ultimately, if they were repentant and humble, Yahweh would deliver them out of that oppression. Now, another way to look at turn the other cheek is insults and cursing. Slapping someone on their right cheek, it would be a backhanded slap. If I slapped Brother Ron, you get my illustrations, Brother Ron, because you sit right here on the front. But if I slapped Brother Ron like this, open-handed, I would hit his left cheek. The way that I would hit his right cheek would be to backhand him. That would be a slap on the right cheek. Most people are right-handed, so that's a backhanded slap. We speak today of a backhanded compliment, where someone compliments you sarcastically or throws negativity in with a compliment. A backhand is an insult or a curse. So it could be figurative here that the slap is speaking of an insult or speaking of a curse. So part of turning the other cheek is when we are insulted or when we are spoken wrongly to or about, we don't respond with insults or slander. We instead receive it with silence, and we choose to respond to the evil with good. An old preacher who was a friend of mine when I was in high school, he was my great uncle, Franklin Walden. I attended a class that he had on Sunday mornings before any of the church services got started, and it was called the Young Timothy's class. And he was training certain men that felt a calling in the ministry to be pastors and leaders. And so I would go to that class, and I was very young, 15, 16 years old. But I was there because I wanted to be there, and most everybody else that was in the class was, late 20s to 40 years old. And I told him one time that I felt like the Lord wanted me to be a preacher. And he said, well, one thing that I'm going to tell you, Matthew, is that if you want to be a preacher, then you have got to learn how to handle the stones that will be thrown at you. He explained to me that being a preacher is not a flashy thing. I guess in our modern day time, it has become that to a lot of people. A lot of people start churches to make money. I think if that's the reason that you start a church, you need to close it, because that's not what it's about. You don't do that to make money, to milk people of their hard-earned money. But he told me, he said, people are going to throw stones at you because that's just how it happens. That comes with the territory. And he told me that he learned a long time ago that when somebody threw a stone at him, instead of picking it up and responding in kind or throwing the stone back, he just took it. Of course, I'm speaking metaphorically. He took it, and he took that stone and he laid it in front of him. And then the next stone that was thrown at him, he took it and he laid it in front of him, and eventually started building a little wall. And he said he had so many stones thrown at him that he didn't throw back, that now in his old age, he had this wall built around him where the stones and the insults and the cursings and the gossips and all of that stuff didn't bother him anymore. And I took it as though he was telling me that when people speak evil of you, you are to respond in speaking good of them. This is something we're going to get into next week, you always will, about loving your enemies and praying for those who persecute you and doing good to those who despitefully use you. I had a man one time come to me and tell me, Brother Matthew, I received a nasty letter from a person. It's not a good letter. I want to read you part of the letter, and I want to ask what your advice is. And he began to read me the letter. And I read it, and I winced, and I cringed, and I shook my head. I said, that's rough. He said, what do you think I ought to do? And I said, let's send them some flowers. Bless those that persecute you and pray for those that despitefully use you. This is the way of the Master. Build a wall with the stones, don't throw them back. The more you respond to insults with love, the stronger you will become in the Spirit. As Proverbs 20 verse 22 says, don't say, I will avenge this evil. Wait on Yahweh and He will rescue you. Or Romans 12:19, friends, do not avenge yourselves. Instead, leave room for His wrath. For it is written, vengeance belongs to me. I will repay, says Yahweh. If we try to take up for ourselves in these everyday injustices that we face, we are not leaving any room for Yahweh to work for us on our behalf. Wanting to get back at people for doing us wrong is not having faith that Yahweh will take care of us and He will avenge the wrath that is placed upon us. Look at Matthew 5, verse 40. As for the one who wants to sue you and take away your shirt, let him have your coat as well. Now, sometimes in this life we have people that get upset at everything. There are people who will take advantage of you. They will take kindness for weakness. And then when you decide even one time not to go along with their agenda, they seek to hurt or to harm you. They try to take you to court. They try to take what is a necessity to you. Here we have somebody that wants to sue you and take away your shirt. And the shirt was the inner garment of the Hebrew. It was the tunic. It was the one that was worn close to the body, which the common Hebrew person would have one or maybe two tunics, unless they were middle class or wealthy. And Yeshua says that if that happens to you, to respond softly. If they want to sue you for your shirt, respond to the evil with good. Offer them your tunic and say, and I'll tell you what, I'll give you my coat. That's the outer garment. I'll give you my coat as well. The outer garment was more costly and more durable. Show the person that is trying to do evil to you that you're willing to give away the very thing that keeps you warm and protected. I remember one time I was listening to a man by the name of Phil Robertson. He was the patriarch on a show. It was a real popular show back in the early 2000s called Duck Dynasty. And Phil Robertson was a man of faith, and he was talking about how that these boys would steal the fish out of his net, and he fished for a living. That's how he made his money. And so he would come up on the river and have this big net strung across the river, and he called them river rats. He said, you got rednecks and then you got river rats. Well, he said, I would come up on them one time and they were stealing my fish, and they tried to say, oh, we didn't know this was a fishing net. Whatever, right? And he said that before he got saved, before he was born again, as he called it, had an encounter with the Savior, that when he pulled up on them, he would pull his pistol out and he would holler, the next person who moves dies. But he had an encounter with the Lord. He was baptized and he started reading his Bible. And he was reading verses like, overcome evil with good. If your enemy's hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him water to drink. In doing so, you'll heap coals of fire on their head. And he said, Lord, do you want me to give them my fish? So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But he said, I've been doing it the other way and they keep stealing my fish. He said, so I'll try it. And so he said the next time that he pulled up on them and they were there stealing his fish, he pulled up on them and they stopped and they had been caught red-handed again. And he said, I tell y'all what, fellas, I got some good news for you today. I'm going to pull the net up, and whatever fish is in the net, I'm going to give them to you. And he said they just looked at him with this dumb look on their face. He pulled the net up. There was fish in there. He gave them the fish, put it in their boat. And he said when they rowed away, they turned around looking at him bewildered. Why did this man just give us his fish? And he said, Lord, I have seen in your hands. And then he told the audience that he was talking to, he said, and they never stole my fish again. All of a sudden they stopped stealing my fish. I didn't have to worry about it. He said, so I tried the Lord at his word and it worked out for me. The reason that Yeshua said that if someone wants to sue you for your tunic, go ahead and give him your coat too, is because when a person sees, even a sinner person, when they see genuine kindness and humility from you, it will change and break down their heart in a way that force and being obnoxious or repaying evil with evil could never do. You cannot change a heart by being hard on the heart, but you can be involved in Yahweh's business of changing hearts by being kind and being gentle and watching the Holy Spirit work. As you give the person your tunic and then your coat, and you're left there as a common Hebrew standing there almost naked, they won't be able to believe it, that you're willing to part with those things. And it is very likely that in that instance, they will turn their wrath away. As Proverbs 15 verse 1 says, a gentle answer quiets anger, but a harsh one stirs it up. So the next time that someone tries to do something unjust to you in these light everyday matters, just stand there and take it and offer them more than what they want and see what happens. Just try the Messiah's words out here and watch the effect that it has on people. In Matthew 5 verse 41, it says, and if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. And the Good News Bible reads, and if one of the occupation troops forces you to carry his pack 1 mile, carry it 2 miles. Now, this actually goes along with what I spoke of earlier about being under the oppression of a foreign government. Government soldiers or workers on dispatch, they would carry messages or packs or packages like sometimes the military does today, or even the Postal Service does. And one of these Roman authorities, these Roman workers, they would have the authority, they were given the authority by the government to stop a person anytime that they wanted to and demand a Roman mile from that person. A Roman mile was 1,000 steps. So they could stop you whether you were working, whether you were on your day off, whether you were taking a break at work. They could stop you and say, look, you need to go 1 mile and carry this pack for me. And Yeshua says that instead of quarreling with the authorities, carry what they ask of you for 1 mile, and then look at them with a smile and say, I'd like to help you out and carry this for another mile. If they ask you to go 1 mile, go with them 2. Now remember here that all of this has an original meaning, which was what I just explained, and it has a principal meaning. When someone asks something of us to only help themselves, as believers in the Messiah, as followers of the Messiah, we should not just go with them 1 mile, we should go that extra mile and do more than was asked of us. The point is that we belong to another world and we don't retaliate, but we act in humility. We hope that the light of the Messiah will be seen in the way that we live. I've told my sons this principle in business, how that when you work for somebody, you do everything that is required of you, and then you do a little something extra. And what that does is it brings a good name for you, a good reputation. And so when somebody mentions your name, they'll say, yeah, use that guy. He does good, goes above and beyond. And Yeshua is telling us that even when somebody asks something of us and they're not being nice about it, you can witness to them by your actions, by doing what they've asked and then doing something extra. The hopes is they'll see how humble and kind you are and want to join the faith with you. Matthew 5:42, our last verse for today. Give to the one who asks you, and don't turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. It just keeps getting harder and harder. Now, I had a few people ask me after my sermon last week, some of them were here and some of them were over social media, what if I don't have it to give, Brother Matthew? What if I don't have finances to give? Or what if I know for sure that a person is going to use it for unrighteousness? A couple of things. If I gave to every single person that I ever saw or that ever asked me, I would be broke. I couldn't take care of myself, I couldn't take care of my wife, and I couldn't take care of my children. That would not be noble of me because my wife and children are my closest neighbors, and I'm called to love and take care of them first. So I'm not saying that every single person that asks you for a handout that you have to give to them. You're not required to fund someone else's sin or unrighteousness. And you are not required to give if you don't have it to give. I told one sister, I said, if you don't have it to give, you might be the person that needs to be given to. And that's okay. The poor we will always have with us, right? But the point of this verse is we often do have more than we need. And we often do find others who are less fortunate than us. Even sinners. Even people that don't care about Yahweh in His way. What should we do? We should help all people as we are able. And we should not expect anything in return from them. With every dollar that we make, brothers and sisters, this is a big teaching in Scripture. This is right up there with the Sabbath, with the sacred name, with honoring your parents. A big teaching in Scripture is that we should use our finances to help the poor and the needy. Widows, fatherless, those with less, foreign residents, those who find themselves in a rough situation in life. We should purposefully set aside part of our finances to help other people so that when we're asked, we don't have to turn a poor person away. Or so that when we're not asked and we see someone in need, we can reach out and say, here is some money to help you in your area of need. Proverbs 21:13 says, if you refuse to listen to the cry of the poor, your own cry for help will not be heard. And the parallel text to Matthew 5 in Luke chapter 6, different author, same sermon. Luke 6 verse 30 and 34 says, give to everyone who asks from you, and from one who takes away your things, don't ask for them back. And if you lend to those from whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to be repaid in full. I think that just speaks for itself. We say, but my rights, but my rights. Yeshua says, give them up. We say, but my money. Yeshua says, give it up. We say, but how will I ever be helped? Anybody ever said that when reading these scriptures? I did as I was sitting at my desk this week putting this sermon together. But how will I ever be helped, Yahweh? And then all of a sudden it clicked. Yahweh is the one who sees when you are wronged. Yahweh is the one who sees when somebody does evil towards you or treats you in a wrong way. You don't think Yahweh sees a person borrow from you and not pay you back? Yahweh sees. Vengeance is His. Leave it in His hands. Yahweh can supply your needs directly from heaven if He chooses. He fed His people with manna from heaven for 40 years in the wilderness. I guarantee you He can feed you and clothe you when you need it if you just be obedient to His word. Just set that humble example and hope that through your obedience people will be led to follow the Messiah and realize this man, this woman really is strange. They don't act like the other humans. They act different. Why? Because, as Yeshua told His disciples, you are not of this world, even as I am not of this world. Now, this has been a difficult sermon, but it does not stop here. There is one more section in Matthew 5 that we have to cover, and it really dovetails on what we've just covered in 38 through 42. And we'll begin to cover that next week. And it is about loving your enemies. Matthew 5:44, Yeshua says, but I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Again, it's easy for me to love Brother Ron. Why? Because Brother Ron is so loving towards me. So I want to love Brother Ron. But if I encounter somebody that doesn't like me or hates me or treats me wrongly or borrows and don't pay back and so forth and so on, insults, curses, it's difficult for me to love somebody like that. Yeshua says, love that person. Be kind to that person. He did not say that this would be easy, but He did tell us to do it. And it goes right along with what we've covered today. So if you want to learn about loving people that hate you or treat you badly, come back next week. That's what I'll be teaching on. Loving people that hate you. Loving and being kind and generous to people who treat you badly. Ooh, that's hard, isn't it? Very difficult.